polls. Polls are, you know, it's fun to see them when you're winning, not so fun when you're not. It doesn't really matter, though. It's June, for crying out loud.
American reporters traveling with the former Florida governor asked about changes in his campaign staff before his campaign is even official.
This is an adjustment based on the skills of people that I got to know during the last 3 months.
All right, that doesn't sound too good. Joining us now is Christopher Bedford, senior editor at the Daily Caller, dailycaller.com. Hello, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. All right, so let me ask you this. You say that Jeb Bush's campaign's in a lot more trouble than they're letting on. Of course, he's not officially announced. I believe, am I wrong that he has an announcement coming on Monday? What is going on here?
So the media's been reporting, and a lot of people have been reporting, that they may or may not make their $100 million fundraising mark. And they're just acting like this has always been their mark. They'll raise maybe $100 million by July 31st. But it hasn't been their mark. Since Jeb Bush's PAC, Right to Rise, first started in January, they started leaking pretty quickly. We're going to raise $100 million in the first 3 months of this year, is the quote, and then possibly $500 million by June. Now, the campaign quickly started to pull back on that a little bit because it's really stupid to throw out that kind of money. And they want you want to impress. You want to say you're going to do a little less and then do a little more.
Right, yeah.
And they did the opposite of that. And then just as the news cycle went, they would start to filter it out differently. Like, oh, yeah, you know, we'll raise $100 million by the end of June or May, they said. Yeah, we'll probably raise $100 million by the end of July. And then they reshuffled the campaign on Monday. They put the campaign manager to campaign strategist, hired Danny Diaz, an outside consultant, to take over as campaign manager. And then they said, maybe we won't reach the $100 million mark. And they were going back and forth so many times. Like when they leaked the campaign shuffle to the New York Times, they said, but don't worry, we're going to make $100 million by July 31st. But then the next day, they told the Washington Post, maybe not. And I think they will, but it shows that they've moved the goalposts from $500 million, which is one leak, to $100 million, and they've moved the timeline back 4 months.
Yeah, no, that doesn't look good, and you're right. The common sense strategy would have been the opposite: shoot low and aim high. Publicly acknowledge at the end, say, hey, we did better than expected. But all right, now, there was a poll out the other day also that in Florida, Marco Rubio would beat Jeb Bush. How harmful are those kinds of polls, and how harmful is, I don't know, I guess the backers he might have depended on now seeing, Rubio doing very well and others doing very well, alternatives to the traditionalist or the inside Republican candidate, which is what Bush represents.
It is what he represents, and that this whole thing, what you're seeing in the polls with Rubio pulling up, really plays into why he had the $100 million strategy in the first place, at least as far as I can see it. It was to scare people. He started the PAC at the beginning of January. By the end of January, by January 30th, after he started leaking this $100 million stuff, this $500 million stuff, Mitt Romney, his biggest competitor, had already disappeared. He said, I'm not running. Then maybe his second biggest competitor for the moderate campaign money was Chris Christie. Chris Christie, of course, still wants to do it, but the donors are saying, hold on a second, we already have Jeb Bush. We don't really need you. And then the whole point, I think part of it was to scare Marco Rubio out of this. Be like, I'm your mentor. I've got the Florida money. There's nothing left for you here, Marco. Don't run. You're a young senator. And he said nuts to that and ran anyways. And he's actually catching up. And I think it's because he's less rusty. He's got he's made mistakes just like Jeb has, but he's less rusty. He's still in the political scene. He's extremely charismatic. Like, he's definitely got Jeb Bush beaten a couple things. And you've seen like Jeb Bush lost a Silicon Valley billionaire to Marco.
Yep.
But even with that, even with the poll numbers like that, and even if they don't make $100 million, conservatives shouldn't be too quick to laugh at
I'm
Jeb.
sure. I'm sure. But to Rubio, the New York Times hit pieces on him, and we only have 30 seconds, show at least how much the left wants to get rid of him.
It's the traffic story is the biggest story since Marco Rubio's water bottle hate. And it's amazing. I don't even know how this is going to affect voters. It came out that his wife is bad at driving.
Right,
so
not
maybe
him.
A male voter will be like, yeah, I hear that. And a female voter will be like, I don't like this at all.
Right.
I have no idea where they're going.
I don't either. Listen, great talking to you. We'll speak to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, my pleasure. All right, folks, up next, Give Me Five. But first, Daily Wrap co-host Rick Unger joins us to give us a preview of what's on tonight's Daily Wrap. Of course, the Daily Wrap follows the Steve Malzberg Show every night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Hello, Rick.
Thanks, Steve. Tonight on The Wrap, we learn whether or not the president was able to work his magic with House Democrats and get the fast-track trade authority he needs to push his trade agreements through. And a big change in tradition in the early primary state of Iowa as the state Republican Party brings an end to the Iowa straw poll. The poll, which has only twice predicted the actual winner of the Iowa caucuses, where delegates are actually won and lost, apparently became too expensive for candidates trying to get some electoral mojo going early in the game. And should it matter that the NAACP leader in Spokane, Washington, turns out to be white? We'll dig into these topics and more tonight on the Daily Wrap, immediately following the Malzberg Show, so be sure to join us.